Are you having problem with your bass lines?
This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my entire life.
You're in the right place because we are going to remake the best bass lines of 2024. So this. And this.
My intuition.
And of course this. And there's one trick that nobody shows on internet that will change how you make your bass lines forever. And I'm not really exaggerating it. I'm not going to keep you waited, so let's jump. MRAK Speranza. Okay, buckle up because this will be a bit wild. Sometimes I show really advanced stuff, but I really do my best to show you how pros do it. And this is a very good example. Everybody has rolling bass lines, but how pros do. We are doing this one. At first sight, it sounds like any other rolling bass line, right? I will show you different ways, pro and semi-pro and the amateur version of doing this. And probably nobody has shown this before. The idea is simple, right? We are going this up and down rolling bass line, G sharp all the way. The easy way to getting this sound will be just bringing in zero, apply envelope, envelope 2 goes a cutoff filter. And the trick will be using unison so that the sound is panned right and left. And of course we have a shaper box or sidechain to kick, right? Sounds good. And most of the time this can be enough, but if we bring in our imager and take a look, you will see that we are all over the place and we may have issues with the monocompatibility. But you know what? If you're not producing for clubs, this will be fine. Now, the novice version of this will be you take the same sound but put a utility and do bass mono. It will solve the issue a bit, but we're still all over the place. And semi-pro version of it, I've shown this before, many people shown it before. You can separate them. High end, other line, sub bass. Now we are much closer in the middle. But you will see that the sounds get a bit phased. It doesn't sound super clean. Pro way of doing this is actually like this. This is probably never shown before and you will probably see it later, other channels showing after me, but it's a good thing, people showing that. So how do you do it properly? This should sound much better sonically, should be much more contained. But we still have the stereo, what's going on, right? This sounds super clean. Buckle up because this will be probably something that you will use whole your production life. All I ask in return is just subscribe to the channel because 50% of the people haven't subscribed to the channel and give it a like. It really helps me a lot. So I'm going to start from scratch so that you understand what I'm doing. Rather than using unison, you want more control on your oscillators and how much you are panning. You can control globally, but it doesn't give you the control of the phases, so you cannot really pinpoint everything. What you need to do, 2 oscillators, pan them 20% to the right, 20% to the left. But nothing is happening, everything is in the middle. I'm gonna just fix the envelopes a little bit so the sound is similar. With fat. Good enough, right? Okay, no stereo at the moment, even though we pan. The trick is you have to change the phase of these 2 sounds so they start to go into the stereo image. Do you hear it? On the imager. Right? Now we are having the stereo, but we are not all over the place. We are not really going all the way to the right and left. But there is more to do this one. So what we can do now is actually remove the fundamental from both, like that. Now we only have highs. Now we can add the fundamental back right in the middle with the sub. Here we go. Now we even contain the sub part and then open up the right and left. Now at this point, decide how much you want because you have all the control in the world. You can pan more. You can phase differentiate more. The more you do this, you will see that the more we will deviate from the middle. But we are still much more contained. If we go back to original, I try to find a sweet spot kind of. I separated original MRAK's bass and compared our bass to his bass. Of course, this is a master track and probably they tighten up a little bit more the stereo image, but if you take a look, you see how similar they look. Behaviors are super similar and sound-wise they are super similar as well. And I know it is probably complicated for you with all these phases and pans and removes the fundamental, but if you want to really make something sounding super good and super tight at the same time, manual control is always way to go with everything. And all together now, look how good it sounds. And nobody else will show you this one. So you're welcome. If you're having problem with your low end, I created Atlas low end tools. It is a pack of different low ends with the kicks and basses and different percussions and so on and so forth. You can either use it just to start your project, or you can reference your own bass or low end with these different low end examples. It will be only $29.90 for the launch, probably only for this week, and later it will be €34. So if you want something as solid as it gets, check that out. This one is for more groovy and dancey bass lines. Goes like this.
My intuition, a real sensation. My intuition, a real sensation.
Very dancey, very groovy. So how does this work? If you remember, maybe a year ago I had another video and I told you that the rumbles are getting into the other genres as well. And this is one of its examples. The first thing we do, we use a longer kick with a body. So it sounds like this. A good thumb and then a relatively long sustain for the kick tail as well. Then we create a second channel. We route this channel to the kick channel and then pick the post effects so that we can hear the kick when we click in here. The volume is much lower. The reason is like we don't want it to take it over. The first thing, a plate reverb. You can use any reverb. I was just testing to get the sound closer. Overdrive. EQ to contain it so we don't need super lows and super highs. Free clip to shave it a little bit, right? And then one more EQ to really contain it in a certain area together. So we have this kind of room effect to the kick, and it's really on the mid to high end, so it doesn't affect the low end too much. Then to make it really in your face with the bass, we divide the bass into sub and the bass. And the sub is very straightforward. Here in Serum, I have a single patch, super simple soft-tooth. The most important thing is having this like a sustain envelope. So the sub sustains so we can really hear the body of the bass. And a lot of drive on it. Right? There's really nice warm subline. We are using 8 pattern, but keep in mind that we have a space in between the patterns. This helps to make sub really separates from the kick. That's the reason that it sounds more groovier when you listen to it. Then I have shaper box here, just sidechain the kick so that we have this. We almost completely take the first hit, but it still kind of glues the things together. Now, the sub is there, but we need some kind of top line, a body, so that we can really hear the bass a little bit better. And for that, we have the secondary bass line over here. So idea is still keeping that warm, analogish sound. And that is the reason I'm using, again, single soft-tooth. Very similar envelopes, but this time we have a really more permanent envelope on the filter, so that we have this movement. Again, we have a good amount of dry and fat to warm it up, and a little bit hyper to make it slightly stereo. And again, one more distortion to make it even more warm. All together. Now, we want more body to this, so I add a bit more saturation. And the more important thing is, of course, taking off all the sub so that sub and the bass doesn't clash. And the color of this is really adding kind of a stabby acid bass stab so that we can hear this more grooviness into it. And for that one, we have one final acid sound. And this one is actually more like a squarish and soft-tooth in between. Sounds like this. How do you get something like that? In this case, the sound was on the side, so we are using unison in 2. So one to the right, one to the left in this case. Detune slightly, but here the main thing is getting a lot of resonance and adding quite a bit of filter to the cutoff. So we have this way movement. But of course, to make it really obvious, you need a lot of distortion. Right? This is not warm. This is warm and kind of more distorted. And delay, OTT to make the body come through. And a reverb EQ a bit, and of course one final filter cutoff so that all this distortion too much, so make it still kind of contained. This is the main trick really, the final filter to clean the sound up. Now let's listen all together and dance to it.
A real sensation, my intuition. A real sensation, my intuition.
It's so good. This one is in between groovy and driving at the same time. Sounds like this. Very cool, again very warm. Let's see how this is done. If you listen to Adriatique, you will see that they like to use really long kicks, and in this case we have a very long one here. Right? And because it's a very long, the space that you can use for your sub bass is really limited, and you can literally see on the pattern for your bass line. Yes, there are things that are overlapping a little bit, but when you sidechain it, they will really fit nicely together. And for the sub bass, the idea really continues, keeping it simple but strong. I want you to take a look at the envelopes. Like the sustain is very high, and the second one on the filter is really tiny, and we are using again this in between sawtooth and square wave. Warm, contained, but still strong. And then a little bit EQ, and of course shaper box for a very aggressive sidechaining. We could definitely make it longer, really something like this. Yeah, we can definitely see that overlapping part here, right? Together. Keep in mind the pattern is actually 2 bars rather than 1 bar, and it's changing quite a bit. It's a very cool pattern as well. And then of course we need something on top, because we want to hear the bass and make a pattern even longer and a bit more prominent. And in this case, this is much busier, and we can do that because we don't really care too much about the kick, because we're on the higher end of the frequency. For this type of sound, you either go for the FM synthesis or ring modulation or both. In the original track, it is slightly different, but I didn't want to spend too much time to do the 100% match, but I think this is really close enough. So in this case, you will probably remember this one, the Serum, like it is acid style sound. I'm of course using a ring modulation on top of that. I know it's getting very confusing. Even though it looks confusing, these are much like trial error. You go and turn some knobs and hear and so on. In this sound, I have 2 engines. The first engine sounds like this. Second engine sounds like this. The second engine gives the bassy part and on the sides, and the first engine is in your face. The way it sounds, get this part is like, let me solo this one. Like this is really bad, but when you start frequency modulation, it gets much more darker and deeper. The reason being, if you take a look at the modulator here, what modulates this one is a sine wave tuned down to 36. So it's a very dark, deep sine wave modulating this one, giving this really darker sound here as well. And of course we have position modulation here, like we are using the envelope to like move this one a bit up. This is already very authentic, very good sound, right? Of course this filter helps make the sound contained a bit on the low end. It's a Foreman filter. And of course, we have tons of delays and distortions on here and here. Another filter cleaning up the top end. Right? And then the second engine, we are using the really very same idea. Frequency modulation, sine wave. And together this really strong, cool sound. This sound is actually coming from my Pigments Obsidian Techno presets. I changed a bit to make it fit a bit more to this track, but most of the modulations were already there. So very cool sound. So what we want, get rid of all the low end, add a delay. It's such a sound, so we are attacking when the original bass hits. And now this really opens up the bass and gives so much character. Listen now. Now, we need to make it more playful. So the first thing is a bass percussion. So we are using another bass line just to give it a bit of color to the space. Sounds here. Like this one is just simple, analog sounding bass patch. I did it on the fly just to match the original track. Just single soft toothish, a bit envelopes on the filter, and matrix 12 for the filter as well. A bit distortion again, and a slight delay. Really this warm sound, not much here. And finally, we need to make it a bit more bigger, and easiest way to do it using bass horns. We have this guy over here. Right? It's big but still contains not like the endless reverb tail either. The easiest way to get this type of sound is using a unison and detuning it quite a bit. You see the envelope one is sustained. We don't use any filter whatsoever. The sound goes straight into the distortion. And we are using diode to relatively aggressive distortion. And compressor to just contain the sound. That is most of the sound really. And then we have of course a bit EQ, heading super lows, and sidechain to kick. And all together now. Super cool. If you want more pro tips, I have more of these here. Take a look.